Hello everyone and welcome back to Sleep Theories. I know you guys use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off, I think it would be cool if everyone commented where you're from in the world and what time you're watching. If you find the video relaxing, make sure to like and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. Dr. Emily Carter stared out at the vast, unbroken horizon of the Nevada desert. The heat shimmered above the ground, a mirage of distortion that seemed to dance in the distance. She adjusted her sunglasses, her gaze falling on the lone stretch of road ahead, leading toward the infamous Area 51. Her car, a dusty, battered sedan, sputtered under the strain of the desert heat. The engine growled as if it too wanted to stop. Emily's fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel. She had spent years studying astrophysics, searching the stars for signals of life beyond Earth, but none of her theories had ever pointed her here, to this place, this secretive, isolated base that had fascinated, frustrated and terrified people for decades. Her phone buzzed, breaking her from her thoughts. A text from an unknown number. "It's time. Meet at the usual spot." She took a deep breath, her heart racing. The message was from Marcus Donovan, an agent she had reluctantly agreed to work with after her involvement in a government investigation years ago. He had told her things she could barely grasp, but he had always been cryptic. And now, it seemed, he was asking her to take the final step into the unknown. The rumors about Area 51 ran wild. A secret military base, rumored to house extraterrestrial technology, the remains of alien beings, and research on things far beyond human comprehension. Emily had dismissed most of it as paranoid fiction. Yet here she was, on her way to the heart of the mystery. The car rolled to a halt in front of a weather-beaten wooden shack by the side of the road. There was no sign, no indication of what it was, only a lonely structure that seemed out of place. Emily parked and stepped out, squinting against the harsh sun. A shadow appeared in the doorway of the shack. Marcus Donovan. He was tall, with sharp features, and the kind of composed demeanor that made him seem like a man who knew how to control every situation. He wore a black suit, the collar of his white shirt slightly unbuttoned in the heat, his sleeves rolled up, but there was something in his eyes, something that betrayed the calm facade he wore. "Emily," he said, his voice low, "we need to move quickly. They're already watching." Emily's pulse quickened and her breath caught in her chest. Who's watching? Who are they? Marcus glanced around, as if ensuring they weren't being overheard, then nodded toward the distant hills. The ones who never stop. The ones who keep the truth hidden. Emily followed his gaze, her mind racing. For the first time in years, she felt the chill of fear creep up her spine. "What's really going on here, Marcus?" He turned and motioned for her to follow him into the shack. Inside it was dark and musty, with peeling walls and dusty furniture, but there was a faint hum of activity, a buzz that suggested something beyond the ordinary. "You're about to find out," Marcus said quietly. "It's all here, the answers you've been searching for, and the ones you might wish you hadn't found." The journey to Area 51 was not what Emily had expected. The sun began to set, casting an eerie glow over the barren landscape as they drove deeper into the desert. The roads grew narrower, the air thinner. Emily tried to shake the sense of foreboding that had settled in her stomach, but it lingered like a weight. As they approached the base, Marcus finally spoke again, his voice low but steady. "I'm not going to lie to you, Emily. What you're about to see will change everything you know about the world. It's not just about aliens. It's about something far more dangerous." Emily frowned. "What do you mean? You're talking like this is bigger than UFOs and government cover-ups." Marcus hesitated, glancing over at her. "It's bigger than anything you've ever imagined. I've seen it. I've been part of it. And now, you're going to be too." Suddenly, a sharp noise interrupted their conversation. A soft beep from the dashboard. Marcus's eyes widened. He quickly turned the steering wheel, pulling the car off the main road into the scrubby brush that surrounded them. Emily's heart pounded. "What's happening?" she asked, panic rising in her voice. "We've been spotted," Marcus replied, his voice cold, focused. "They're not going to let us in without a fight." The car screeched to a halt as several military vehicles appeared on the horizon, their headlights blinding in the darkening desert. Emily's hands clenched the edge of the seat, her body tense. "They won't shoot," Marcus said, his calmness unsettling. "They want us to think they will, but they won't." "How do you know that?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. "Because they want us to see the truth," Marcus replied, his eyes darkening. "And they know that the more we see, the harder it will be to forget." The military vehicles closed in, but as they reached a few hundred feet from the car, they stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating, as if the desert itself had drawn a deep breath. Then a man stepped out of the lead vehicle, a figure clad in black, his face obscured by the shadows of his hat. Marcus turned to Emily, his expression unreadable. "It's time." As they approached the entrance to Area 51, the massive steel gates loomed before them, heavy and impenetrable. Guards stood at attention, their eyes scanning the desert with an eerie precision. But Marcus walked up to the gate without hesitation, his hand raised, signaling for the guards to let them through. Emily hesitated, her mind swirling with disbelief. She had read all the reports, heard the wild stories, but none of it had prepared her for the feeling of stepping into this forbidden zone. "What are we going to see in there?" she whispered. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her with a knowing expression. "What you see and what you learn will be more than you can handle, but you have to choose, Emily. If you walk through that door, you can't unsee what's inside." The gate creaked as it slowly swung open, revealing the darkened expanse of Area 51 beyond. The base seemed to stretch out forever, an isolated world tucked away in the heart of the desert. Bright floodlights illuminated the towering structures in the distance, casting long, sharp shadows across the ground. Despite the presence of armed guards and military vehicles, there was an unsettling stillness about the place. Marcus led Emily through the gate without a word, his expression unreadable. As they passed the first checkpoint, Emily's skin prickled. There was something unnervingly quiet about the base. No sounds of machinery, no hum of activity, just an unnatural silence that pressed in on her from all sides. "Where is everyone?" Emily whispered. "The ones who matter are hidden," Marcus replied, his voice low. "The rest are expendable." They continued down a narrow, dimly lit road, the gravel crunching beneath their feet. As they approached a large metal door, it slid open with a mechanical hiss, revealing a small, sterile hallway. Emily's mind raced, her thoughts swirling with questions. Every step she took seemed heavier, the weight of the unknown pressing in on her chest. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and ozone, and the walls were lined with cold, unforgiving metal. Marcus led her down another hallway, this one darker, the flickering lights casting long shadows. At the end of the hall was another door, this one far more secure, with biometric scanners and a series of codes required to unlock it. Marcus stood before the door, his hand hovering over the keypad. "This is it," he said, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. "Once we go through, there's no turning back." Emily didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the door. The sense of unease was growing stronger, but something inside her, a deep curiosity, a need for answers, urged her forward. She nodded, barely able to find her voice. "Let's go." The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a vast chamber filled with monitors, blinking lights and rows of sealed containers. At the far end of the room stood a large observation window, behind which a figure moved, shadowed and indistinct. "What is this place?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is where it all began," Marcus replied, his tone somber. "This is where they study the things they don't want you to know." As they walked deeper into the room, Emily noticed the sealed containers, large, cylindrical, and ominously marked with strange symbols. Some were cracked open, revealing objects that seemed, out of place. Pieces of metal, crystalline structures, almost like and devices that defied explanation. She couldn't make sense of it all, her scientific mind struggling to comprehend what her eyes were seeing. This is... She swallowed hard. This is impossible. Marcus stopped in front of one of the containers, his expression hardening. That's what they want you to believe. Emily stepped closer, peering through the glass. Inside was a fragment of what looked like a craft, something clearly not of earthly origin. It was smooth and metallic, with an intricate, almost organic design. Her heart raced as she took in the sight. What is that? Is that an alien ship? Marcus nodded. It's one of the many things we've recovered over the years. We've learned a lot from it. Too much, in fact, but not everything. Emily's eyes darted from one container to the next, her breath quickening. There were dozens of them, each holding something different. A piece of a body, a fragment of a ship, strange artifacts she couldn't begin to understand. But the one thing that stood out above all the others was the object in the center of the room. It was a cube. The cube was encased in a transparent, airtight chamber, the surface of it glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. It seemed to hum, sending vibrations through the air. Emily felt an inexplicable pull toward it, a sense of wonder and dread intertwined. Is that... She couldn't finish the question. That's the key, Marcus said, his voice quiet. The one thing that can change everything. Emily stepped closer to the cube, her fingers itching to reach out, to touch it. But something stopped her. An unspoken warning in the air, a sense that even standing this close to it was dangerous. What does it do? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her with a mixture of admiration and regret. It's not something you can just understand. It's not from our world. It doesn't obey our laws of physics or logic. It communicates in ways we can't explain. Emily's eyes widened. Communicates? Marcus nodded. It has a consciousness of its own. At least we think it does. We've been studying it for years, trying to unlock its secrets. But every time we get closer, the consequences get worse. Consequences? Emily asked, her heart pounding. What kind of consequences? Marcus hesitated, looking down at the floor. The kind that make people disappear, the kind that change your perception of reality, and the kind that draw attention we don't want. Before Emily could respond, a loud alarm suddenly blared through the facility, its shrill sound cutting through the tense silence. Red lights flashed, casting an eerie glow over the room. Marcus's face turned pale, and he grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her toward the door. "They found us," he said, urgency creeping into his voice. "We need to go now." "What's happening?" Emily demanded, struggling to keep pace as Marcus pulled her down the hallway. "There's no time to explain," Marcus replied, his voice tight. "They know we're here. They're going to shut everything down." As they ran through the labyrinth of hallways, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them, heavy, deliberate, and closing in fast. Emily's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. What had she just seen? What was the cube? And who were they? Marcus led her to a set of stairs down into a lower level. The air grew colder as they descended, and the alarms grew louder, more frantic. When they reached the bottom, Marcus stopped, pressing his hand against the wall. A hidden door slid open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Inside was a control panel, humming with activity. "This is it," Marcus said, his voice steady but with a touch of finality. "This is where we end it." Emily's mind spun. "End what?" Marcus turned to her, his eyes grave. "The conspiracy, the cover-up, everything. You've seen the truth, Emily. But now you have to decide whether you want to expose it to the world or let it stay hidden forever." Emily stood frozen, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The secrets of Area 51, the cube, the aliens. It was all too much. But now she had the power to change everything. The room was thick with tension. the hum of the control panel a constant reminder of the gravity of the situation. Emily's heart raced as she looked at Marcus, who was now standing near the console, his fingers hovering above the keys. The weight of the decision pressing on her chest was almost suffocating. "Do you understand what this means, Emily?" Marcus asked quietly, not looking at her. "If you expose this, there's no going back. The world will never be the same." Emily took a step forward, her mind whirling. The images from the observation room, alien bodies, strange artifacts, and the glowing cube were burned into her memory. It was all real. This wasn't some wild conspiracy or government cover-up. This was something much bigger. And now she had the chance to change everything. But could she really do it? "What happens if we just leave?" Emily asked, her voice hoarse. "If we walk away, let it all stay buried?" Marcus didn't answer right away. His face was unreadable as he studied the control panel. The alarms were still blaring, growing louder by the second. It was clear that the security systems were in full lockdown mode. "They'll come for us," Marcus said, his voice dark. "But if we leave, we're just another pair of bodies they'll bury to protect their secret. And nothing will change. The world will go on, blind to what's really out there." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She knew he was right. Every conspiracy she had studied, every whisper of government cover-ups, every wild claim about extraterrestrial life, it all pointed to this moment. The truth was out there, and she had the power to bring it to light. "Do you want to know what they really fear, Emily?" Marcus continued, his tone grim. "It's not just the public finding out about the aliens. It's what happens when the world finally knows. People won't just accept it. They'll demand answers, and those answers will shatter everything. The economy, governments, religions, everything people think they know will be called into question. That's why they've kept it hidden for so long." Emily took a deep breath. The thought of the chaos that would follow a revelation of such magnitude was terrifying. But it also felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The truth had to come out. People deserved to know. But the cube. Her eyes darted to the chamber across the room, still glowing faintly. She remembered the hum, the strange pull it had on her, as if it were calling to her, asking her to understand. There was more to this than just aliens or technology. There was something else, something deeper. She stepped toward the control panel, her hand shaking as she reached out to Marcus. "What happens if I activate it? The cube, I mean. What does it do?" Marcus's face paled slightly, and for the first time Emily saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. "I don't know. We've tried to interact with it, tried to learn from it, but it doesn't work the way anything else does. It's not just a piece of technology. It's alive. It reacts to human presence, to thought. Some of us believe it might even be a kind of gateway, or perhaps a communication device. But activating it could have consequences we can't predict. It might expose us to things we're not ready for." Emily hesitated, her fingers hovering just above the control panel. She thought about the decades of silence, the secrecy, the lives that had been lost to protect whatever was inside this base. "Then we need to find out," she said, her voice steady. "We can't leave here without understanding what it really is." Marcus didn't argue. Instead, he stepped back, giving her space. "You're right, but you have to make sure you're ready for what's coming. Whatever happens, you can't undo it." Emily nodded, steeling herself for what was ahead. She took a deep breath and pressed the button. The room shook. At first it was a subtle vibration beneath her feet, like a low-frequency hum running through the walls, but then it intensified, the floor trembling as if the entire building was being affected by something far beyond human comprehension. The cube's glow grew brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the vibrations. The air around them seemed to thicken, distorting in the unnatural light. Emily's skin tingled, as though the very atmosphere had changed. "What's happening?" Emily asked, her voice rising in panic. "Is this supposed to happen?" "I don't know," Marcus shouted over the noise. "Get away from it!" but it was too late. The light from the cube suddenly exploded outward in a blinding flash, engulfing the entire room. Emily threw up her arm instinctively, shielding her eyes from the intensity of the light. The sound was deafening, like the roar of 1,000 voices, all speaking in unison. And then, everything went still. The silence was absolute. Emily opened her eyes slowly, cautiously. The room around her was exactly the same, except for one thing. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, they all seemed to shimmer, as if reality itself had been altered. The faint hum that had filled the room was now gone. In its place was an eerie stillness. Marcus was standing next to her, his face pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. What just happened?" Emily whispered. I don't know," Marcus muttered, his voice shaky. "But we've activated something we weren't supposed to." Suddenly the control panel lit up, displaying a series of strange alien symbols. The screen flickered as though something was trying to communicate with them, something beyond human understanding. Marcus took a step back, his face hardening. "This isn't good. We need to leave. Now." Before they could react, the door to the room slammed open and armed guards rushed in, their weapons raised. They were followed by several men in suits, high-ranking officials from the government. "Dr. Carter," one of the suited men said, his voice cold, his face expressionless. "We were hoping you'd cooperate, but it seems you've already made your choice." Emily's heart sank. She had hoped they might still have a chance to control the situation, to get the truth out to the world. But now, it was clear that there would be no easy way out. "You'll come with us," the man continued, his voice turning icy. "You've seen too much, and now you'll never leave." Marcus took a step forward, his hand subtly resting on the weapon at his side. But before he could say anything, Emily spoke, her voice firm. "Number, I'm not going anywhere." The officials exchanged glances. There was a shift in the air, a palpable tension that hung over the room. Emily didn't know what they would do next, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to let them erase everything she had just uncovered. The truth was out there, and no matter the cost, she would make sure the world knew it. The air in the room was thick with tension, a quiet, simmering threat hanging over every word. Emily's mind raced, her thoughts darting from one possibility to the next. The glowing cube hummed softly, as though it was still alive, still reaching for something, or someone. Her heart pounded in her chest, the weight of her choices sinking in. The government was here, and they weren't going to let her go easily. The suited man who had spoken before stepped forward, his cold eyes locking onto hers. He was tall, with dark, slicked-back hair and a face that betrayed no emotion. Behind him, the guards held their weapons at the ready, their fingers twitching toward the triggers. "I don't know what you're dealing with, Dr. Carter," the man said, his voice smooth yet filled with an unspoken threat. "You've activated something you cannot control, something that was never meant to be touched by human hands." Emily stood her ground, her mind spinning, but her resolve hardening with every passing second. "What is it? What is the cube? What does it do?" The man's lips curled into a thin, humorless smile. "You wouldn't understand. No one could. But that doesn't matter anymore. The damage is done. Now we have to clean up your mess." Marcus moved slightly behind her, his hand still hovering near his sidearm, but he didn't make a move. Emily could feel the tension radiating off him, but he didn't seem ready to fight. Not yet, anyway. The suited man raised his hand, signaling to the guards to lower their weapons. "We're not here to kill you, Doctor Carter. Not yet, anyway. We're here to take you to a more secure location." "Secure location," Emily repeated, her voice rising with disbelief. "You mean a prison?" The man's expression remained impassive. "You've seen too much, and you've exposed the cube. Now, there are forces at play that neither of us can control. We need to understand what it's doing, and you're the only one who can help us." Marcus spoke up, his voice low but filled with venom. "You think you can control it? After everything we've learned? You have no idea what it's capable of." The man's eyes flicked toward Marcus, a glimmer of irritation crossing his face. "We don't need your assistance, Mr. Donovan. We've been handling these matters far longer than you've been alive." Emily stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "You're lying," she said. "You're hiding the truth. All of this, every last bit of it, it's been a cover-up. You're afraid of the power of that cube, and you want to suppress it, bury it before it exposes everything." The suited man's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. He didn't respond immediately, but the threat in the air grew heavier. The guards behind him shifted their weight, clearly prepared for whatever action might come next. "That's enough," the man finally said. "We'll be taking you to the holding facility now. Any resistance and we won't hesitate." Emily's heart raced. She knew she couldn't let them take her. She couldn't let them silence her, not when she was this close to the truth. The cube had already reacted to her presence, and she felt it again. A strange, pulsating sensation, as though it were alive and aware of what was happening. And then, something happened. The humming from the cube intensified, filling the room with an eerie vibration that seemed to penetrate the walls. The lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows. The air grew thick and heavy, as though something else was trying to break through, to enter this space from somewhere beyond. One of the guards stepped forward, raising his weapon. "What the hell is happening?" The suited man's eyes widened, his hand flying to his earpiece. "We're not alone," he said, his voice suddenly tense. Before anyone could react, a strange noise filled the room, a low, guttural sound, like a hum mixed with a distant roar. The walls seemed to ripple, warping in a way that defied logic. And then, in the blink of an eye, the air shifted. The guards froze, their weapons now pointed at nothing. Emily turned, her breath catching in her throat as she saw what had appeared. The room was no longer the sterile metallic facility she had been standing in. Instead, the walls were gone, replaced by an endless black expanse, dotted with distant shifting lights. The floor beneath them had become an unrecognizable surface, shimmering like water, though it was solid. This isn't possible," one of the guards stammered, his voice shaking with fear. "Where are we? What happened?" Emily's mind raced. The cube had done this. Somehow it had opened a portal. No, not a portal. It was something deeper, something that connected dimensions, timelines, worlds. She didn't know how or why, but it was clear now. The cube wasn't just a piece of technology. It was a doorway to something far greater, far more dangerous. The suited man looked frantic, his hands shaking as he tried to recalibrate the control panel, but it was useless. The panel was dead, the symbols on the screen flashing erratically. Nothing responded. "This is impossible," he muttered, almost to himself. The cube was never meant to activate like this. It was supposed to stay dormant, sealed away. "Then why didn't you just leave it alone?" Marcus spat, his voice filled with contempt. "Why did you think you could control something so far beyond your understanding?" The suited man turned, his face pale, his eyes wild. "You think you're in control now? You think the cube just did this on its own? You have no idea what you've unleashed." Emily looked around at the distorted alien landscape that now surrounded them. "Then what is it? What is the cube? Why does it have this power?" The suited man opened his mouth, but no words came out. Instead, the room seemed to tremble once more. The strange hum intensified, growing louder, more insistent. Then, suddenly, a voice filled the air, a deep, resonant voice that seemed to echo from every direction. "You have opened the door." The voice was not human. It was ancient, reverberating through every cell of Emily's body. It felt like the very fabric of reality was bending, like the universe itself was speaking directly to her. The suited man's face twisted in horror. No, it wasn't supposed to. Emily's heart raced. "Who are you? What are you?" "I am the way," the voice continued, its tone calm but filled with an undeniable power. "The cube is but a guide, a key to unlocking the knowledge that you have long forgotten. But be warned, child of Earth, the truth comes with a price." The air vibrated with the words. and Emily felt something deep within her stir. It wasn't just a voice. It was a presence, a consciousness far beyond human comprehension. The suited man stumbled back, his face ashen. "We've made a grave mistake," he muttered, almost to himself. Emily turned to Marcus, her mind still racing. This is it. This is what they were hiding. Marcus's gaze was steady, but there was fear in his eyes. This is just the beginning. The deep voice continued to reverberate through the air, filling every corner of the strange, distorted room. The ground beneath them shimmered like liquid glass, reflecting fragmented images of alien worlds, distant stars, and technologies far beyond human comprehension. The suited man's face twisted in terror, his hands shaking as he grasped for the control panel that no longer worked. I told you," he gasped, his voice trembling. "This was never supposed to happen." Emily turned to Marcus, her mind racing, her body humming with the energy that filled the room. The cube, now pulsating at the center of it all, had opened a doorway to something incomprehensible, a force that none of them were prepared for. But now the truth was undeniable. The government had been hiding something far more dangerous than they'd ever let on. "We have to stop it," Emily said, her voice low, steady. "Whatever it is, it can't be allowed to go further." Marcus looked at her, his expression serious. "Stopping it won't be easy. The cube didn't just open a door. It's connected us to something much older than this planet. We've awakened something, and it doesn't want to go back to sleep." Before Emily could respond, the voice spoke again, louder, more commanding. "The time of secrets has ended. The gate is open, and the old ones shall return." The air seemed to crackle with energy, and a deep, unsettling hum vibrated through the room as the ground beneath them began to tremble. The once solid walls now seemed to ripple, as though reality itself was beginning to fold in on itself. Emily felt a pull, something powerful, something ancient. She could sense it in the very air she breathed. The cube had unlocked something far greater than just knowledge. It had called forth an ancient force, a cosmic intelligence that had watched over the universe for millennia. "What are the old ones?" Emily whispered, her voice thick with awe and fear. The voice answered, but this time it seemed to come from within her own mind. "The old ones are the guardians of the universal truth. We watched as your species took its first steps into the stars, and now we return to guide you. The choice is yours, to join us in the rebirth of a new era, or to perish in the echoes of your own ignorance." The ground continued to shake, and Emily could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her. The truth was there, waiting to be revealed, a truth that could change everything about how humanity viewed its place in the universe. The power of the cube, the presence of the old ones, it was all connected, but at what cost? The suited man, now visibly broken, collapsed to his knees. "No, we didn't understand," he sobbed. "We never knew what it would truly mean. We thought we could control it." The cube's light grew even brighter, and Emily knew time was running out. She turned to Marcus, who had remained eerily calm despite the chaos. "Marcus, we have to make a decision. Right now," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "The truth is here, but do we expose it? Do we let the world know what's really out there?" Marcus stared at the cube, his face shadowed with the weight of the moment. "We can't unsee it," he said softly. "The truth is already out there, Emily. But whether the world is ready for it, that's another question." The ground trembled again, and the voice spoke once more urgent this time. "The gateway is closing. The choice must be made now." Emily took a deep breath, her hands shaking. She knew what had to be done. The world couldn't stay in the dark forever. Humanity needed to understand its place in the grand scheme of things, even if it meant the collapse of everything they knew. She stepped forward, closer to the cube, feeling its energy surge through her. "We have to reveal it," she said firmly. "We can't let them hide it anymore." The world deserves to know the truth. The old ones, they're offering something beyond our understanding, but they're also giving us the choice to change, to evolve. She turned toward the suited man, who was still kneeling on the ground, his face filled with desperation. "You have to help us," she said. "The world is about to change, and you can't stop it. All you can do now is help us share it." The man looked up, his face filled with a mixture of fear, regret, and awe. He knew the truth now, and there was no turning back. But as Emily moved to activate the final sequence, the cube pulsed once more, its energy crackling violently. She hesitated, sensing something was wrong. A loud, screeching noise filled the room, followed by a flash of light that blinded them all. When the light finally faded, everything was still. The room was back to its original state. Its walls, floors, and lights were all exactly as they had been when they first entered. But something had changed. The energy in the air felt different, heavier, charged with a sense of finality. Marcus stepped forward, glancing around. What just happened? Where did it go? Emily felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The cube was gone, and in its place, there was a single, simple message on the control panel. "The truth has been set in motion. There is no going back." The voice of the old ones had fallen silent, but its presence still lingered in the air, as though they were watching, waiting. Emily knew that whatever happened next, the world would never be the same. The truth about the cube, about the forces beyond their comprehension, had been set in motion. Humanity was on the cusp of something far greater than they could have ever imagined, but the price had already been paid, and now the future would unfold, whether they were ready for it or not.
Ethan didn't remember a time in his life when he didn't feel out of place. Growing up, he was the quiet kid, the one who sat in the corner of the classroom with his nose buried in a book or staring out the window, wondering if there was something more beyond the confines of the world he knew. While his friends grew excited about parties, clubs, and futures mapped out in clean, predictable lines, Ethan felt only a creeping dread, an unshakable feeling that something was missing. He'd often felt like he was standing at the edge of something vast, a place beyond his understanding, and he'd wondered if he might accidentally stumble into it one day. His life had been ordinary, perhaps too ordinary, and sometimes he thought that was the scariest thing of all. He spent most of his free time chasing stories and curiosities, unexplained mysteries, urban legends, and tales of things that couldn't be. The Backrooms was one of his favourites. He first read about it on a forum late one night, an innocuous post titled, "If you're not careful, you might slip between the cracks and lower into the back rooms." The premise was simple, terrifying. The Backrooms were a hidden dimension, an endless maze of empty, yellowed rooms, a place you could fall into if you weren't careful, disappearing from the world as you knew it. The idea left him with a chill that lingered long after he'd closed his laptop. To some part of Ethan, the Backrooms didn't just sound like a horror story. They sounded like something real, a hidden layer of reality lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for the right or wrong person to find it. He even dreamed about it sometimes. His curiosity deepened into a quiet obsession, and he'd spend hours researching theories, reading accounts from people who claimed to have seen glimpses of it or felt its strange pull in the periphery of their lives. This fascination made him feel alive, but it also made him reckless. He began to wonder what it would feel like to slip between the cracks himself, to see if a place like the Backrooms could really exist. He'd explore abandoned buildings on weekends, walk the quiet, empty halls of his university late at night, always searching for something just out of reach. It became his ritual, a strange comfort that filled the gap he couldn't explain, that constant need to find something beyond the mundane. It was a normal Thursday afternoon, and Ethan was on his way home from a late night of studying in the library. He was tired, his head aching from hours of staring at his laptop screen. His thoughts were muddled as he waited for the elevator to take him down to the parking lot. When the doors finally slid open, he stepped inside, pressed the button for the ground floor and closed his eyes. Leaning against the wall for a moment, that was when it happened. With a sharp jolt, the elevator stopped, sending a shock through Ethan's body and jolting him upright. He opened his eyes, blinking in confusion, but there were no lights, no numbers indicating what floor he was on. Only a dim, sickly yellow glow filtered through the tiny window in the elevator door. Confused, he pressed the door open button, hoping to see something familiar. The doors shuddered open with a creak, revealing a room, not the parking lot, not even the dimly lit hallway of his university building. Just an empty room with faded, peeling wallpaper and harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Ethan hesitated, peering out into the strange expanse. The wallpaper was an ugly, sickly yellow, dotted with tiny, unrecognisable stains, and the floor was covered in cheap industrial-grade carpet that looked damp in places. The hum of the lights seemed louder out here, a grating drone that wormed its way into his skull. He felt his stomach churn, a deep primal unease settling over him. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the elevator. The doors closed behind him with a loud clang, but when he turned around, the elevator was gone. Nothing but an empty wall stood where it had been. Panic started to creep in as he took a step back, then another. This can't be real, he whispered to himself. His voice sounded strange, swallowed by the space around him. He turned, looking around, but all he could see was a vast stretch of identical yellow-tinted rooms. There was no end in sight, only more walls, more corners leading into more of the same. He tried calling out, his voice echoing faintly, swallowed by the relentless hum of the lights. "Hello? Is anyone here?" Silence answered him, thick and oppressive. With no other option, he started to walk, hoping that if he went far enough he'd find an exit, or at least someone who could explain this bizarre place. His footsteps were muffled by the carpet, and the further he walked, the more the rooms seemed to blend together. Every corner, every turn looked exactly the same, an endless maze of empty, deserted spaces. After what felt like hours of wandering, Ethan's initial fear dulled into a kind of numb desperation. He began to feel disoriented, the sameness of the place eating away at his sense of time and direction. His throat felt dry, and he realised he hadn't seen any signs of water, food, or even another living soul. Just endless rooms and the nauseating stench of stale air. Then he saw it. A shadow, flickering just beyond the edge of his vision, barely noticeable against the yellow walls. He froze, his heart pounding. The shadow was moving. "Hello," he called out again, his voice cracking. "Is someone there?" The shadow darted out of view, slipping around a corner before he could get a good look at it. His instinct was to run, to get as far away from that shadow as possible, but something compelled him forward. A morbid curiosity mingled with the faint hope of finding another human being in this nightmare. He crept forward, rounding the corner, but the shadow was gone. He continued down the hallway, the humming lights above creating a strange hypnotic rhythm that made his thoughts feel hazy and slow. Just as he was about to turn back, he heard a sound. It was faint, almost like a soft shuffling, as if something was dragging across the carpet. He held his breath, his heart hammering as he strained to hear. The sound grew louder, closer, until he could make out a strange, uneven rhythm, as though whatever was moving didn't have the same number of limbs as he did. He turned to face the direction of the noise, his eyes wide with terror. Emerging from around a corner was a figure, tall and impossibly thin, with limbs that seemed too long, too stretched, as though they'd been pulled like taffy. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes were wide and empty, two hollow sockets that seemed to drink in the dim light around them. Its mouth stretched into a grotesque, gaping grin, filled with rows of needle-like teeth. Ethan stumbled back, his hand flying to his mouth to stifle a scream. The creature tilted its head, studying him with an unnervingly calm curiosity, as if it were examining a particularly interesting bug. Then, slowly, it began to move forward, each step deliberate and unnatural, its joints bending at impossible angles. Paralysed by fear, Ethan's mind screamed at him to run, but his legs felt like lead. The creature was only a few feet away now, its twisted form looming over him, filling the space with an overwhelming sense of dread. Finally, his survival instincts kicked in, and he spun on his heel, sprinting back the way he'd come. He could hear it behind him, that terrible shuffling sound as it followed, closing in with an eerie persistence. His breath came in ragged gasps, his heart pounding so loudly it nearly drowned out the hum of the lights. He took random turns, ducking through rooms and around corners, hoping to throw it off his trail, but no matter how far he ran, he could still feel its presence lurking just out of sight. As he rounded another corner, he stumbled into a different room. This one was larger than the others, with a ceiling that seemed to stretch up impossibly high, vanishing into darkness. In the centre of the room was a single decrepit armchair, facing away from him. He was too tired to question it, his legs shaking as he collapsed against the wall, breathing heavily. For a moment he allowed himself to hope that he had finally lost the creature. But then a voice, a low, raspy whisper, filled the room, coming from somewhere near the armchair. "Why, did you come here?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The voice was quiet, almost gentle, but there was something sinister lurking beneath it, a malevolent edge that made his skin crawl. I don't know how I got here," he managed to stammer, his voice barely a whisper. The armchair creaked, as if someone were shifting in it, though he still couldn't see who or what was sitting there. "No one comes here by accident," the voice replied, a hint of amusement in its tone. "You wanted to be here. You're one of us now." Ethan shook his head, panic rising in his throat. "I don't belong here. I didn't mean to come here." The chair creaked again, and Ethan could feel the thing in it watching him, though he couldn't see its face. The oppressive silence seemed to press in on him, as if the walls themselves were leaning closer, eager to hear what he had to say. "You belong here now," the voice continued, a strange warmth in its tone, like a parent soothing the frightened child. "The back rooms have chosen you. There's no way out." As the words sank in, Ethan felt a cold, hollow emptiness fill his chest. He wanted to scream, to run, but he was too exhausted, too drained by the endless maze of rooms and the oppressive hum of the lights. He sank to his knees, his mind racing, searching for some semblance of hope, some way to escape this nightmare. But deep down, he knew the truth. There was no way out. The back rooms were endless, a labyrinth of yellow walls and flickering lights, stretching on forever, trapping him in their suffocating embrace. The thing in the armchair chuckled softly, a sound that echoed off the walls, filling the room with a dark, mocking joy. "Welcome home, Ethan," it whispered. And as the lights flickered above him, casting long shadows that seemed to close in from every corner, Ethan felt himself slipping away, the last fragments of his sanity dissolving into the hum of the fluorescent lights. He was home. After his harrowing escape from the back rooms, Ethan struggled to return to his normal life. He tried to convince himself that it had been a nightmare, the result of exhaustion and a wandering mind. But deep down, he knew the truth. He'd been there, in that endless maze of yellow rooms, the echoing hum of fluorescent lights buzzing in his ears, the creature with the impossibly long limbs hunting him through every corner and corridor. He'd only narrowly escaped, stumbling back through an elevator that had seemed to appear out of nowhere and waking up in the real world as though nothing had happened. Weeks passed, but the back rooms haunted him. He saw glimpses of it in reflections, in dark corners, even in the university hallways that had once seemed so ordinary. He developed a hyper-awareness, a dread that every corner he turned would lead him back into that yellow, buzzing nightmare. His friends noticed his anxiety, his sleeplessness, but he couldn't bring himself to tell anyone. How could he explain something so surreal, something he could hardly believe himself? He was sure it would get better with time, but his dreams betrayed him. Almost every night he would return to the back rooms in his sleep. He would wander through its endless corridors, its stale, musty air thickening with every breath. No matter how he tried to direct his dream, no matter how aware he became, he was always drawn deeper into the maze. And in every dream the creature was there, lurking in the shadows, watching him with those empty eyes, that horrible grin. One night Ethan jolted awake, sweat pouring down his face, the hum of the fluorescent lights still ringing in his ears. His pulse pounded as he sat in the darkness of his room, clutching his bedsheets. It was a nightmare, just a nightmare, he told himself over and over. But the line between waking and sleeping was blurring, and he began to feel as though the back rooms were calling to him, beckoning him back. Despite his growing fear, something within him stirred, a curiosity, or perhaps a sick obsession. The fear of returning to the back rooms was tempered by an undeniable pull, a whisper that told him he hadn't yet seen everything there. He was certain it would swallow him whole if he went back, but some part of him felt he had to know the truth of what lay beyond those endless yellow rooms. The uncertainty gnawed at him, tugging at the back of his mind until he could think of little else. One Friday night, after another sleepless week, he gave in. It was as though he were possessed, acting on some deep unspoken impulse. He found himself back in the library, a little past midnight, with nothing but the quiet hum of the building to keep him company. He rode the same elevator he'd taken the last time, pressing the ground floor button, feeling the jolt as the elevator began its descent. But this time, there was no jolt to stop him. The elevator smoothly reached the ground floor, and the doors slid open to reveal the quiet university lobby. Disappointed and relieved in equal measure, he let out a shaky laugh. He'd been foolish, he thought, to believe the back rooms could be summoned by something so simple. As he stepped out of the elevator, he froze. The lobby looked different. The lights were dimmer, the walls slightly yellowed, and an odd damp smell hung in the air. Slowly, his heart sinking, he turned to look behind him. The elevator doors were still open, but there was no lobby beyond them. Only the familiar yellow-tinted wallpaper, the buzz of the fluorescent lights, and that endless carpeted expanse stretching into oblivion. Ethan felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He was back. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself. This time, he wouldn't panic. He would stay calm, map out a path, and find his way out. He'd done it once, and he could do it again. But as he started to walk, he noticed subtle differences. The rooms felt darker, the smell stronger, almost like mildew mixed with something metallic. And the buzzing was louder, a harsh, grating sound that rattled in his skull. He wandered through the hallways, taking mental notes of every turn, every detail he could remember. But the back rooms seemed to shift around him, subtly changing with each step, making it impossible to find his way back. And soon enough, he began to hear the faint, shuffling footsteps he dreaded. The creature was here again. Ethan quickened his pace, his heart pounding. The footsteps followed him, echoing in sync with his own. He glanced over his shoulder, catching a glimpse of its grotesque, elongated form rounding a corner, moving with a horrible, jerking grace. He forced himself to keep calm, his mind racing as he tried to think of a way to escape. Room after room he searched for a way out, for any clue that could guide him. But the rooms seemed different this time, as if they were trying to trap him. The walls seemed to close in on him, narrowing with every turn, the air growing thick and stagnant. The creature's footsteps grew louder, closer, and Ethan knew he couldn't keep running forever. Finally, he stumbled into a room that looked different. A wide, empty space with a single door at the far end, something he hadn't seen before. With no other choice, he sprinted for it, throwing himself through the door just as he heard the creature behind him, its horrible breathing echoing in his ears. He shut the door, his back pressed against it as he gasped for breath. The room he'd entered was dimly lit, quieter, the buzzing sound fading to a low hum. The wallpaper was still that sickly yellow, but the atmosphere felt different, almost like a forgotten place, untouched even by the back rooms. In the centre of the room was a large rusted metal door, unlike anything he'd seen in his previous visits. With a surge of hope, he moved towards it, gripping the cold handle. He pulled and the door swung open, revealing a dark, narrow passage. He didn't hesitate. He stepped inside, the door closing with a heavy thud behind him. The passage stretched on, the air growing colder, the walls narrowing until he could barely fit through. He squeezed his way down the hallway, his hands brushing against rough, uneven walls, and as he moved he noticed something strange. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights was gone, replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the faint drip of water echoing somewhere in the distance. He kept moving forward, the passage twisting and turning in unpredictable ways. The deeper he went, the darker it became, until he was stumbling blindly, feeling his way along the walls. His sense of direction was gone. He was deep within the back rooms, deeper than he'd ever been before, in a place that felt hidden, even from the horrors he'd already encountered. Finally, he saw a faint glimmer of light ahead. Desperate, he hurried toward it, his heart racing with hope. As he reached the end of the passage, he found himself standing before another door, this one old and weathered, with strange symbols etched into the wood. With trembling hands he opened it, stepping through into his room, his own bedroom, dimly lit by the first light of dawn. Ethan stared in disbelief, feeling the familiar softness of his carpet beneath his feet, the quiet hum of the city outside his window. He was home, truly home. He took a deep breath, his heart finally beginning to slow. For a long moment, he simply stood there, letting the reality of his escape wash over him. The back rooms had let him go. Somehow, he'd finally escaped. But as he sank onto his bed, exhausted, he couldn't shake the feeling that the back rooms were still with him, lurking in the shadows of his mind. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights, the stale smell, the creature's hollow eyes, all of it haunted him, a presence he could feel even in the safety of his room. And then he realised with a shiver that the room felt colder than usual. A subtle, creeping chill filled the air, seeping through the walls, brushing against his skin like fingers trailing ice. His breath fogged in the dim light, something that had never happened before in his cosy apartment. It was as though the warmth and safety he'd known here had been drained, replaced with the oppressive, stagnant atmosphere he'd left behind. Ethan sat up, glancing around. Everything looked normal. The posters on his walls, his desk cluttered with notes, the blanket he'd thrown carelessly to the side. But the silence was deafening. Outside his window, the familiar city sounds were gone, replaced by a dead, heavy stillness. He reached for his phone to check the time, but the screen remained blank, lifeless. His heart began to race as he tapped the screen over and over, but the device was unresponsive, a dark mirror reflecting his own fearful expression. Slowly, he became aware of a faint, almost imperceptible sound, a noise he'd tried so hard to forget. The low, ominous hum of fluorescent lights. It was faint at first, a murmur on the edge of his hearing, but as he listened it grew louder, filling the room with that same mind-numbing buzz. Ethan stood up, gripping his bedpost for support as he scanned his surroundings. The walls of his room seemed to shift subtly, the wallpaper taking on a yellow tint, faded and stained, as if something had leached the colour out of it. The air thickened, that familiar smell of mildew creeping in, the metallic tang that clung to his senses. His stomach twisted with a dawning, sick realisation. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling. "No, I got out. But the room only continued to change, morphing around him. His bed stretched longer, the carpet rippled into endless patches, the door faded from view, leaving nothing but an expanse of yellowed walls and buzzing lights. The familiar furnishings of his room vanished entirely, swallowed by the sickly expanse. As he backed up, his foot collided with something soft yet solid, a familiar thick patch of carpet. His heart dropped, and he turned, dread curling in his stomach. The backrooms had found him again, and this time, he feared, it would never let him go. For thousands of years, people have whispered about a lost civilization, an ancient world that was rich, powerful, and far more advanced than anything humanity has ever known. This is the story of Atlantis, a place that many believe holds secrets capable of transforming the world. But Atlantis isn't just a legend. For some, it's a conspiracy, hidden away by powerful forces who want its secrets buried forever. For those who believe in the conspiracy, Atlantis represents more than just a lost city. It's a symbol of everything that has been suppressed throughout history. The idea that an ancient civilization could possess technology, wisdom, and knowledge far beyond our current understanding is both thrilling and terrifying. What if the Atlanteans had harnessed the power to manipulate energy, cure diseases, or even travel across the stars? What if they had discovered truths about the universe that we are only beginning to understand today? And yet, despite the tantalizing possibility, Atlantis remains elusive, its true nature hidden beneath the sands of time and the depths of the ocean. This, to the conspiracy theorists, is no accident. They argue that powerful elites, whether governments, shadow organisations, or ancient secret societies, have worked to keep the truth about Atlantis buried, believing that such knowledge could destabilise the world's current power structures. Imagine the upheaval that would follow if such a discovery were to be made public. Industries built on oil and energy would collapse. Technologies we have only dreamed of could become reality, and the entire way we understand human history might be turned upside down. The very fact that Atlantis remains unfound only strengthens the belief that these powerful forces are actively suppressing the truth. The story of Atlantis, then, is not just a story of a lost civilization. It is a story of control. of how those who hold power might go to extreme lengths to prevent the masses from uncovering a truth that could change everything. The conspiracy doesn't just suggest that Atlantis was a real place. It proposes that what Atlantis represents is so dangerous, so revolutionary, that it must be kept hidden at all costs. The story of Atlantis begins with the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who around 360 BC wrote about an extraordinary civilization that existed 9,000 years before his time. In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato described Atlantis as a vast island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the area we now know as the Strait of Gibraltar. Atlantis was a civilization with unmatched wealth and power, boasting vast resources, advanced architecture, and knowledge beyond the understanding of other cultures. The Atlanteans, however, grew arrogant and morally corrupt, challenging even the gods. As punishment, the gods supposedly sent a cataclysmic disaster that sank the entire island in a single day and night, taking the city and its secrets with it to the bottom of the ocean. For centuries, many believed Plato's story was merely a legend or an allegory. But over time, Atlantis transformed from a mythical place into a real mystery, captivating explorers, archaeologists, and conspiracy theorists alike. The story grew as new theories surfaced, each claiming Atlantis might not only have been real, but might also hold answers to some of humanity's deepest questions. As explorers searched for Atlantis, they proposed countless possible locations. Some pointed to Santorini, a Greek island that suffered a massive volcanic eruption that wiped out a flourishing civilization around 1600 BC. Others looked to the waters off the coast of Spain, believing underwater structures found there might be remnants of the lost city. There were even more far-flung theories that placed Atlantis in South America, under Antarctica's ice, or in the Sahara Desert, where a strange ring-like structure known as the Richat structure, nicknamed the Eye of the Sahara, resembles Plato's description of concentric rings in the city's design. Beyond the search for a physical location, the mythological aspects of Atlantis have fascinated scholars and storytellers for centuries. In Greek mythology, Atlantis represents more than just a city. It's a symbol of humanity's reach for greatness and the tragic downfall that often accompanies it. Plato's account of Atlantis wasn't just about an advanced civilization. It was a tale of ambition, power, and ultimately, divine retribution. In his dialogues, Plato presents Atlantis as a place blessed by the gods, particularly Poseidon, the god of the sea. According to legend, Poseidon created Atlantis by carving an island for his beloved mortal wife, Cleito. They had 5 sets of twin sons who became the kings of the island, dividing it into 10 distinct kingdoms. The Atlantean kings ruled over the people and were initially just, wise, and aligned with the virtues Poseidon embodied: balance, power, and respect for nature. However, over generations, the Atlanteans began to drift from these virtues, becoming increasingly greedy, corrupt, and hungry for domination. Their once harmonious society fell victim to excess, losing touch with their divine origins. This moral decline is crucial to understanding Atlantis as a myth. The Atlanteans' downfall wasn't merely a result of natural disaster, but was symbolic of divine punishment. In the ancient world, myths often served as warnings, teaching that pride and moral corruption would invite the wrath of the gods. When the Atlanteans turned away from their principles, Zeus, the king of the gods, called a council to punish them for their hubris. In a single day and night, he sent earthquakes and floods that sank the entire civilization beneath the ocean, erasing it as if it had never existed. This mythological element emphasizes the idea that Atlantis represents a golden age of human potential, lost to greed and arrogance, a recurring theme across many ancient tales. Some researchers have even suggested that the story of Atlantis draws from older myths that span multiple cultures. Similar tales of lost cities and sunken lands appear in the lore of other civilizations. The ancient Mesopotamians told the story of a great flood in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which has striking parallels to both the Atlantis myth and the biblical flood in the story of Noah's Ark. In Hindu mythology, there are references to a great ancient city named Dwarka, which was submerged by the sea after a cosmic battle. These stories collectively paint a picture of a recurring archetype in human consciousness, a fear of losing everything to the forces of nature or to the gods as a punishment for moral failure. Atlantis also evokes the concept of a lost paradise, similar to the Garden of Eden in Abrahamic traditions. Like Eden, Atlantis is thought to have been a place of purity, wisdom, and divine connection. Lost because humanity strayed from its original path. In this way, Atlantis serves as both a cautionary tale and a reminder of humanity's potential, a vision of a time when humans were closer to the gods, possessing wisdom and technology that have since been forgotten. In esoteric traditions and mysticism, Atlantis has taken on an even deeper significance. Some mystics believe that Atlantis was not only advanced technologically, but also spiritually. The Atlanteans, according to these accounts, were highly enlightened beings who had mastered forms of energy and consciousness far beyond what we know today. Some stories describe the Atlanteans as being able to communicate telepathically, access different planes of existence, or even achieve physical immortality. In these mystical views, the fall of Atlantis wasn't just a loss of a city, but the loss of a spiritual and intellectual height that humanity has not yet regained. For many in modern times, Atlantis has come to represent an idealized utopian society, a lost civilization that embodied humanity's greatest strengths and fell to its greatest weaknesses. It is both a paradise lost and a cautionary tale, warning of the dangers that come with power, arrogance, and the abandonment of moral principles. The story of Atlantis endures because it reflects timeless human themes, resonating across cultures and centuries, blending historical speculation with deep mythological roots. In the end, whether Atlantis was a real place or simply a product of myth, it serves as a powerful symbol in our collective imagination, a reminder of both the heights humanity can reach and the depths to which it can fall. But where Atlantis might lie buried is just one piece of the mystery. What really fuels the conspiracy are the claims of what might be hidden there. According to some theories, Atlantis was a civilization so advanced that it possessed technology far beyond anything we have today. Many believe the Atlanteans had discovered a limitless source of energy, supposedly harnessed through massive crystals that channeled energy across the city, powering everything from their transportation systems to their weaponry. Others speculate that the Atlanteans had mastered flight, agriculture, and medicine in ways we still don't fully understand. If true, such discoveries would be invaluable to the modern world, and perhaps that's exactly why some argue the powers that be don't want us to find it. This is where the conspiracy deepens. According to theorists, there are powerful groups, governments, corporations, even religious institutions that know the truth about Atlantis and have been actively working to keep it hidden. Why? Because if Atlantis' secrets were uncovered, they could threaten the global power structure as we know it. Imagine what would happen if an ancient sustainable energy source were discovered, one that could replace fossil fuels overnight. Entire industries would collapse, and the world's economic order would be thrown into chaos. Some say that big energy companies, particularly those in oil and gas, would do anything to keep such a technology from ever seeing the light of day. The conspiracy stretches beyond just governments and corporations. Some even believe that religious organizations, particularly the Vatican, might be involved. Throughout history, the Church has guarded countless ancient texts and artifacts, many of which remain locked away from the public. Conspiracy theorists argue that the Vatican might be hiding documents that contain details of Atlantis' history or even instructions on how to harness its technology. If Atlantis existed and held advanced knowledge, it would call into question our current understanding of human history, evolution, and ancient civilizations. It might suggest that humanity's origins are far older and more complex than we think, perhaps even influenced by extraterrestrial beings. Yes, extraterrestrials. Another popular theory in the Atlantis conspiracy suggests that the Atlanteans were either in contact with aliens or might even have been extraterrestrials themselves. Proponents of this idea point to ancient legends from around the world, which tell of gods descending from the sky, bringing advanced knowledge to early human civilizations. Some conspiracy theorists believe that these gods were actually aliens who shared their technology with the Atlanteans. This theory ties into the broader ancient astronaut hypothesis, which claims that extraterrestrials have influenced human development throughout history. If this theory holds any truth, then Atlantis wasn't just an advanced city, it was a bridge between humans and otherworldly beings. But every time researchers get close to finding concrete evidence, something strange seems to happen. Some claim that underwater expeditions have mysteriously lost funding, that valuable documents have disappeared, or that independent researchers have been silenced. There are rumours of researchers who came too close to finding Atlantis suddenly facing threats, lawsuits, or even accidents. To conspiracy theorists, these stories aren't coincidences. They're proof of a deliberate effort to bury the truth. And while no one has officially confirmed the existence of Atlantis, modern technology has fueled new searches. Satellite imagery, underwater drones, and ground-penetrating radar are revealing more about Earth's hidden landscapes than ever before. Some claim that ancient structures on the ocean floor could be remnants of Atlantis, though these findings remain unproven. Still, every new discovery seems to bring more questions than answers. So, was Atlantis a real place? An advanced civilization that perished overnight, taking secrets of unimaginable power to the ocean floor? Or is it simply a myth? A story crafted by Plato to warn of the dangers of pride and hubris? For those who believe in the conspiracy, Atlantis is more than a cautionary tale. It's a hidden chapter in human history, one that's been intentionally erased. And the fact that we haven't found it yet doesn't discourage them. It only deepens their conviction that powerful forces want to keep Atlantis' secrets buried forever. Whether Atlantis is waiting to be discovered under the waves or forever lost to history, its legend endures. And as long as there are those who believe in its secrets, the hunt for Atlantis and the conspiracy theories surrounding it will continue. But perhaps what keeps the legend of Atlantis alive isn't just the mystery of whether it existed, it's the tantalizing hope of what it represents. Atlantis stirs something deep in the human psyche, a fascination with lost knowledge, untapped potential, and the possibility of an ancient civilization whose achievements could still reshape our understanding of the world today. For believers, Atlantis is not just a piece of ancient history, but a blueprint for humanity's potential, a lost paradise that, if found, could open doors to discoveries beyond our wildest dreams. Some conspiracy theorists even suggest that Atlantis' secrets could include revolutionary technologies that we have yet to rediscover, like the ability to harness limitless energy, profound medical knowledge that could extend human life, and scientific principles that could explain phenomena still unexplored. These theories weave Atlantis into modern discussions of everything from quantum mechanics to alternative energy sources, implying that a trove of Atlantean wisdom might lie buried beneath the waves, capable of catapulting humanity into a new golden age. If only it could be unearthed. And yet, for as many who yearn to find Atlantis, there are those who believe that powerful entities have gone to great lengths to keep it hidden. They argue that governments, secret societies, and powerful corporations have suppressed evidence of Atlantis to maintain control. To these believers, it's no coincidence that promising discoveries vanish, or that funding for Atlantis research is mysteriously pulled. They believe that a world order dependent on fossil fuels, financial hierarchies, and centralized power would have everything to lose if Atlantis, and the technologies it may have possessed, were ever uncovered. Even more mystically inclined theorists claim that Atlantis holds keys to spiritual truths and enlightenment, suggesting that the Atlanteans had access to higher levels of consciousness, or even contact with celestial beings. Some argue that Atlantis was a civilization that bridged humanity and the divine, with its knowledge guiding humans to higher planes of existence, until that knowledge was lost, either through human folly or deliberate erasure. For these believers, rediscovering Atlantis could mean reclaiming a path towards spiritual awakening, allowing humans to reconnect with an ancient divine understanding of the universe and our place within it. So as modern technology improves and underwater exploration pushes into new frontiers, the question remains, will we ever uncover the secrets of Atlantis? Is it possible that sonar scans or satellite imagery might someday reveal a submerged city, finally proving Atlantis was real? Or will it remain forever shrouded in mystery, protected by the ocean's depths and the weight of millennia? Perhaps it's this very elusiveness that keeps Atlantis alive in our imaginations. It's a riddle without an answer, a dream that remains tantalizingly out of reach. And as long as Atlantis remains unfound, its legend will continue to captivate, a story of both human aspiration and the dangers of ambition. So whether or not Atlantis truly lies beneath the waves, one thing is certain: as long as there are those who believe in its secrets, the hunt for Atlantis and the mysteries it promises will never end.